Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Speaking of the House Speaker, she is showing no signs that she's about to bow to any pressure to finally send over those articles to the Senate. I remember the House passed this historic vote 22 days ago now, but she is delayed sending them over out of concern the Senate will not hold an impartial trial, and here the Speaker was today.
You will keep asking me the same question. I keep giving you the same answer. As I said right from the start, we need to see the arena in which we are sending our managers. Is that too much to ask? At some point, we would hope that we would see from them what the terms of engagement will be. I'll send them over when I'm ready. And that will probably be soon. I think we should move smartly and strategically.
Now, make no mistake, pressure is mounting. Several Democratic senators have urged Speaker Pelosi to move forward, joining the Republican call. As we mentioned, Senator Feinstein says, quote, the longer it goes on, the less urgent it becomes. Senator Joe Manchin said, quote, I think it's time to turn the articles over. What's more here, Democrats from Speaker Pelosi's own chamber want her to end this impasse. And that included, at one point, one of her House chairmen.
I think it is time to send the impeachment to the Senate and let Mitch McConnell be responsible for the fairness of the trial. He ultimately is.
But Congressman Smith's opposition did not last long this morning. He walked that back, saying that he misspoke, adding that Democrats, quote, should do everything we can to force the Senate to have a fair trial. Still, Congressman Smith is not the only House member wanting to move on. Manu Raju caught up with one Democrat from a swing district.
Hey, Don, do you think it's time for the Speaker to rise with the Senate, please? You do.
I couldn't. It was so quick I didn't hear. Dana Bash is CNN's chief political correspondent. You speak, members of Congress flying past you. I mean, what he...
Yeah, he said, do you want them to go? He said yes.
Yes.
He's on the same page as the Senate Democrat.
What are you hearing? What is Speaker Pelosi going to do?
Well, I love that you played that kind of mashup of what she said this morning, because she very clearly wants to signal, don't push me. On the other hand, the pressure is there. It's there in a real way. And those two colliding sentiments they were so clear with what happened with Adam Smith. He was on this very network.
Yes, he was.
Our John Berman, it's time to do it, and then walked it back. It wasn't just because he had an epiphany. There's no question. We don't know exactly how it went down, but he's a smart guy and a serious guy, and for him to have to do that, it's exhibit A, B, and C of how the House Speaker doesn't want to be pushed publicly.
Even Senator Cardin, exactly. He's like, Nancy Pelosi's Nancy Pelosi, and Nancy
he's
Pelosi's
a creature of the House, exactly.
Right.
He knows what he's talking about there. Having said that, I'm told that the Speaker is signaling internally, don't go far, stay close. Not saying anything more than that. She, as Manu and Phil have been reporting, she holds her cards very close to her vest, even among her nearest and dearest. But she's saying, she's signaling we're almost there.
As in maybe the next 24 hours?
Maybe the next 24 hours.
Okay.
What she is hoping, and she said this publicly, and I'm told privately as well, that Mitch McConnell, who has said, okay, fine, I'll send you over what we're planning for the Senate trial, that he actually does it. But the hope is that happens, and that is the catalyst for her finally saying, okay, you got it. I'm gonna appoint the managers who are going to be the effective prosecutors, and I'm going to send over the articles of impeachment so the Senate trial can start. But she might not be able to wait that long. I'm also told that she understands that there are a lot of members, those members like the one Manu talked to, who are out on a limb politically back home, the so-called frontliners who are in Trump districts, and to go home one more time, even for a weekend, and without saying, yeah, it's going over there. Really it's going to be very, very really hard tough for them. She understands that.
There's also more reporting I want to ask you about. This is also coming from Phil and Sarah Westwood about how President Trump's getting this conflicting information on whether to bring conservative House members onto his defense team for the impeachment trial, a la, does he want theatrics or no?
Well, it's theatrics, but it's also the people he thinks defend him the best. And the answer to who he thinks defend him the best are, some of the most prominent players in the conservative side of the House Republican conference. Jim Jordan, the people we saw all during the impeachment trial. Jim Jordan, Radcliffe, those figures. He loved watching that show. To have them from his perspective, and he is being encouraged to push for people like them to work alongside of his own lawyers, his own legal team in the Senate trial. Others, our colleagues, Phil and Sarah and others, are reporting that Mitch McConnell, who actually is the majority leader of the Senate, went to the president yesterday and said that's a bad idea because it won't help your case. Because in the Senate, the people they're trying to influence are the moderate Republicans on any given witness. The question is, how are they going to vote on any given witness? And having a conservative trying to shove it down their throat may not help.
It is Friday, the 10th of January of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all night hawks in the diner of life. The French 77s are available for your imbibing pleasure, so please do. We're going to need it. It's going to be one of those long weekends. It's already been a long week, has it not? Congress, Nancy Pelosi, got the House to vote on limiting Trump's war powers. He is absolutely livid that anybody could do that. In fact, Rudy and others are out making the claim right now that limiting his powers, Congress limiting his powers, is unconstitutional. Well, that's a good thing to know, because it must be in one of those little OLC memos that we just are discovering right now. And we're going to have one of those coming up. We're going to have a little reportage on a little known OLC memo. Oh, yes. And it looks like if you sleep with snakes, you're going to get bit, especially if those snakes are in the swamp. Drain the swamp. All they meant was drain the swamp so that the real vermin can survive. And Matt Gaetz, now I got to tell you, I'm no big fan of Matt Gaetz. And just like Mike Lee, I told you, give that guy 24 hours. He'll be right back in the MAGA cult. And I was right. So Matt Gaetz voted for the War Powers Act, limiting Trump's powers to declare war without congressional approval. And I got to tell you, a lot of people are up in arms about that. The MAGA cult are just attacking him. And like I said, you sleep with snakes, you're going to get bit, Matt. But I don't trust any of these people. He'll be back in the fold right away. And he'll make apologies for, well, look, we are Congress, but he's God. The cult is unwavering, as cults are. So, in the history of cults, you do know that the cult leader will go by the wayside, sometimes in a violent way. But a lot of the cult members that are left, they got to live with it for the rest of their lives. But before that process even occurs, there's the purge of the sycophants who still believe that the cult leader is directing them from the other side. So we have to look out for that. All right. Boeing got exposed, their employees just making fun of the FAA while they're building a plane that's going to fall out of the sky because of software glitches. And I'm a little upset because, Boeing, I know they're a war-making industry. Making the instruments to be able to fight the wars. I know that. But, they're also do other things on the civilian side, like, airliners. And these big contracts for these airliners are quite important, not only for the Northwest, but I would say for America as a whole. But certainly we here in the Northwest like it when jobs are had. And it's not just Boeing that's doing this. It's all the other parts and whatnot that make up what Boeing does, right down to payroll. Exactly. There are little companies that will do the payroll, let alone, the guy who's making taps and dies to put threads on parts. So you got the guy making the tools that make the threads, then you got to thread the parts. And then somebody else has to put them on. Well, employees and some line supervisors, by the way, were quite disdainful of government regulation. Almost sort of like back in the Enron days. I know kids are going to say, what's that? Well, look it up. But there's a famous quote from the Enron days of these traders laughing about little old ladies losing their power and dying in the middle of the night because they froze to death. And they called the amorphous woman, elderly woman, dying at night from freezing to death. They referred to her as Grandma Millie. And they used to joke about, what would Grandma Millie think? And they'd write these messages back and forth to each other, just laughing about, maybe Grandma Millie would be thinking, why am I so cold? Or maybe Grandma Millie would be thinking, why am I breathing my last breath? It's just, it was cruel. It was icky. And it pretty much was emblematic of the spirit of that company. Let's be clear. So it's bothersome to hear Boeing and their employees exposing the spirit of the company, disdainful of government when they have government contracts. Well. Bite the hand that feeds you. They always do. You get a certain level of money or prestige or power, and I don't know. You want to slap the person that's been feeding you because you know better. We always do. What is on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, at the top, that was a breakdown of, actually a Democratic congressman, a chairman, actually, from Washington State, who broke with Nancy Pelosi on impeachment, but quickly backtracked. Now, I know that Di-Fi says, send him over, but she's a senator, okay? There's a little, I wouldn't call it internecine conflict, but, we're talking about a branch of government here, a bicameral branch of government. So there is a little division between those two. And Di-Fi being on the Senate side really doesn't have much to say on the House side of Congress. But she can, because we're all Democrats, Democratic voters anyway. And but some other Congress critters had taken issue against maybe holding up the articles of impeachment, and they did quickly backtrack because you don't mess with Nancy. We do have a Mitch McConnell, and it's apparent that he would like, obviously, to, he's changing the rules of the Senate as we speak. So that he can just disregard those articles of impeachment even before they're sent over, because that's a graveyard. Moscow Mitch has created a graveyard in which he is the Grim Reaper, and the Senate is where democracy goes to die and be buried. Indeed. On the rest of the menu, the Trump administration found that little-known OLC memo that I intimated earlier that ruled the deadline for the Equal Rights Amendment is long past. So too bad, ladies. Just too bad. A GOP lawmaker forgot to fill in the blanks on a bill he copied from an anti-abortion legislation bill. It's not just ALEC. There's all these other companies that are just write these templates for all of these dimwits who don't know how to govern. But they have an idea about how they'd like to tell us how to live. But they still have to fill in the blanks. And in a move to take the power out of the hands of greedy pharmaceutical companies, California could become the first state to make its own prescription medicines. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where adding to the growing murder toll of journalists, a missing Mexican radio host is found shot to death in the violent state of Michoacan. And Puerto Rico Governor Wanda Vázquez said power should be fully restored across the island by Monday, after the worst earthquake in over a century. Oh, and a little side note. Trump hasn't said word one about the earthquake in Puerto Rico. Not one word. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. The bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice the link to our Patreon page, and do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. We would be unable to do any of this without you. And we've been doing it for over 8 years, going on 9 now. Wow. I know we're not as big as MSNBC. Darn it. But we're a powerhouse of resistance, and we like to think that we bring you a little extra, a little more, and, with a good heart. So we're able to do that because of your generosity, because of your good heart. And we are forever thankful that you have such a big heart. And if you could become, once again, a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, say about the cost of an espresso-type coffee drink, send those funds our way, and we will stretch those dollars beyond compare. Indeed. And thank you. Thank you for doing so. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and I got to tell you, he does a lot more than just that, too. Thank you, Tom. I take care of at Justice Putnam. Follow me there, because I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on social media. In fact, I link it up on at Cookbook West, and you can pick up podcasts of the show by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. We're all the way down in the W's if you didn't know. You do. All right, let's get into this first offering here. And oops, I didn't open it up yet, did I? I like to open these links up just so that they're all loaded and you don't have to wait for, any issues. But this first offering comes out of Reuters, by Lawrence Hurley. The Trump administration said it was too late to renew the effort to push through a decades-old proposed amendment to the U.S. Constitution that would ensure American women have equal rights to men. Too late, ladies. It's gone on too long, and you're just going to have to sit down and shut up, and would you please just smile more? You know, you'd be a lot prettier if you'd smile more. Well, the U.S. Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel, the OLC, issued a legal opinion saying the deadline had long passed for additional states to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, which was backed by 35 states in the 1970s, three short of the required number. The amendment, which was first proposed in the 1920s and gained traction during the rise of the feminist movement, states in part, equality of rights under the law shall not be abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. And obviously that's just a step too far for the little ladies to take. You know, when you start off as chattel, do you really expect at some point to be treated as an equal human being? How dare you? The House and Senate both supported the measure in 1972, but set a 7-year deadline, later extended until 1982, for it to be ratified. Well, recently there's been a new effort to get 3 additional states to sign on. Nevada did so in 2017, and Illinois followed suit in 2018. Now, Virginia could, under the theory proposed by supporters of the amendment, become the 38th state as it is expected to vote this year. But when the OLC presents a memo that says, oh, no, slow down now. We determine what is constitutional now, not the Supreme Court. Really? The Democratic-controlled House Judiciary Committee voted in November to approve a measure that would retroactively remove the ratification deadline. The opinion by the OLC, issued on Wednesday, could provide legal ammunition for opponents as the debate plays out at the state level and in Congress. Assistant Attorney General Stephen Engel wrote in the opinion that while Congress had the constitutional authority to set the deadline, it cannot now reopen the issue. Really? Congress may not revive a proposed amendment after the deadline has expired, he wrote. Should the people of the United States wish to adopt the ERA as part of the Constitution, then the appropriate path is for Congress to propose that amendment once more and start anew? Is that what you're saying? The National Archives and Records Administration, a federal agency that has a role in certifying ratification, said in a statement that it would abide by the Justice Department opinion unless otherwise directed by a final court order.
Josh Israel of the American Independent brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. John McGuire, a Republican member of Virginia's House of Delegates, filed an anti-abortion bill similar to those already being pushed in multiple states by the National Right to Life Committee. The title of that proposed bill, however, was left partially blank. Name of state Unborn Child Protection from Dismemberment Abortion Act. So he should have put in Virginia Unborn Child. But, this is what happens when you have term limits. People who know how to legislate get termed out so that people who don't know anything except a bunch of ideology, and they don't want little ladies having equal rights. So put them into office. In this reporter's opinion, of course. I just add a little bit on to the news. The bill appears to be a carbon copy of one drafted by the anti-choice NLRC, a legislation bill for state-based anti-abortion restrictions. The NLRC has pushed virtually identical language in several states across the country, and a dozen states have enacted these bans, though several have been blocked in the courts as unconstitutional. Pronounce it all the way through. Unconstitutional. The error was first spotted by Virginia political strategist Ben Trevitt, who cited it as an example of the state's new GOP minority phoning it in already. Wednesday, when the bill was presented, marked the first day of the 2020 legislative session, the first under Democratic control since the 1999 elections. Wow. Frustrated by a lack of federal legislation to prohibit abortions, the anti-abortion movement has been increasingly focused on carefully named and incremental state-based restrictions intended to make it all but impossible for women and gender minorities to access abortion. Those bills are typically distributed with the assumption that the state names will be filled in before introduction. Despite its Orwellian name, McGuire's bill would prohibit the abortion method known as dilation and evacuation, a D&E, except in cases of serious health risk, of course, the bill states. Now, according to the Guttmacher Institute, the D&E, dilation and evacuation, is the most commonly used method used in the second trimester and has been documented as safe since the late 1970s. But oh no, can't have that. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists says this approach, quote, is evidence-based and medically preferred because it results in the fewest complications for women compared to alternative procedures, end quote. McGuire did not respond to an inquiry about the legislation or its origin because he's back beating his staff right now, wondering how the hell did they not put the state of Virginia in the proper blank space? Because he doesn't do any work. How would he know how to do that? McGuire's bill is unlikely to become law under the new Democratic-controlled state legislature. Governor Ralph Northam and the new Democratic majorities in the Virginia House of Delegates and Senate announced an 11-point Virginia 2020 policy on Tuesday that expressly promised to, quote, restore women's reproductive rights and to overturn laws that have injected politics into women's health care. McGuire, who was just reelected to a second term in the House of Delegates in November, announced days after his victory that he would seek the Republican nomination to challenge Representative Abigail Spanberger, a Democrat of Virginia in 2020. And as a lawmaker, he voted against ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment last year, despite having listed himself as a co-sponsor in 2018.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Adam Beam of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. California could become the first state to make its own prescription drugs under a proposal announced yesterday, Thursday, by Governor Gavin Newsom, who says it would take the power out of the hands of greedy pharmaceutical companies. The Democratic governor wants the nation's most populous state to contract with generic drug companies to make medications on its behalf so it could sell them to its nearly 40 million residents. The goal is to lower prices by increasing competition in the generic drug market, Newsom said. Well, obviously, this is the liberals' attempt to vaccinate everybody and take away all freedoms. And how do they do it? By poisoning their precious bodily fluids. Really? Well, back to the real news at hand. Other countries control or negotiate the price of drugs, and if there is one state that could do it, it's California, which is the size of a country, said Larry Levitt, Executive Vice President of Health Policy for the Kaiser Family Foundation. A drug company could walk away from Rhode Island. It's much harder to walk away from California. Gavin Newsom's proposal would also create a single market for drug pricing in California, with companies having to bid to sell their medicine at a uniform price. One expert said that piece alone would have the bigger impact. Lawmakers would have to approve the proposal before it could become law. A legislative leader in charge of reviewing the plan gave a tentative endorsement yesterday, Thursday. If Costco can have a Kirkland brand, why can't California have our own generic brand, said Democratic Assemblyman Joaquin Arambula, a emergency room doctor from Fresno who chairs the House Budget Subcommittee on Health and Human Services. I really do think there's quite a bit of merit in having us produce the medications. A representative from the Association for Accessible Medicines, which represents generic drug manufacturers, did not respond to a request for comment. The drug plan is part of Newsom's budget proposal, which he must present to lawmakers by today. The state could have as much as a $7 billion surplus this year. Wow. What a socialist. How is it that Republicans always burn through the budget surplus and then they have deficits, and then somehow the Democrats are able to right the ship, but because they have a surplus, that's just evil? Well, how about having a rainy day fund and being able to fund the things that need to be funded, and also those that you are unaware are going to be needed funding in the future? Why not think of that? I thought that was fiscal conservatism. Newsom's office did not say how much the drug proposal would cost, prompting criticism from some Republican lawmakers who said the state should not compete with private companies. When the state runs it, it costs more money. No, it doesn't. It actually costs less. The money is coming out of families' pockets, paying all those crazy taxes. They only have one thing that they say. They're lizard brains. Taxes. California law requires drug companies to report any price increases to the state. Generic drugs saw a 3-year median increase of 37.5%, according to a report from the Office of Statewide Health Planning and Development. That analysis was based on the list prices of drugs and did not include discounts or rebates. But the report does not include generic drugs that decreased in price because companies are not required to report that. Nationally, generic drug prices have been decreasing overall, according to a report that ARP produced with the University of Minnesota. Supporters say California's generic drug label could help lower the cost of a common drug that has steadily increased in price. Guess what that is? Yes, insulin for diabetes patients.
3 drug companies control the market for insulin. But if California joins, there's something evil about that, isn't it? Why do we have such a large block of people who are so anti-government, but yet they rely on government to pretty much promote their greedy nature? Well, a certain aspect of government, which I propose that we vote out in November. And we have a primary coming up all over the nation, starting in Iowa, by the way, caucus this. And we got to get our house in order. And we need to purge them at the voting booth and term them out now. All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we are going to go through weather from around the world, and we are going to finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Does the president have the authority to start a war? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Article 1 of the Constitution, which sets forth the powers of Congress, says Congress shall have power to declare war. Article 2, which sets forth the power of the executive branch, says the president shall be commander-in-chief of the Army and Navy of the United States. So, the Constitution sets forth a clear division of powers. The legislative branch decides the policy, the executive branch executes it. But when it comes to war, history and those words diverge. The United States has been involved in many military conflicts in the past 75 years, but Congress has not adopted a formal declaration of war since 1942. The authorization for the use of military force, passed in response to 9/11, permits the president to use military force against, but only against, those nations, organizations, or persons involved in the terrorist attacks of 9/11. AUMF has no end date, and President Trump at times has claimed that the AUMF justifies his use of the military. At other times he insists that he can, with or without the AUMF, start a war with Iran. Congress's decision on a resolution to prohibit military action against Iran without its authorization puts a spotlight on the issue whether Congress has the power and gumption to reclaim its constitutional prerogative to decide whether the United States goes to war or not. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1860. That was a day of tragedy as the Pemberton Mill collapsed in Lawrence, Massachusetts. The collapse of the 5-story textile mill was one of the worst workplace disasters in U.S. history. Most of the 800 workers in the mill were women and Irish immigrants. Some were teenagers. During that fateful afternoon, as they were working, they heard a strange rattling noise. Then, within seconds, the mill collapsed. Tons of machinery crashed through the collapsing floors, crushing workers. Many more were trapped. Rescuers attempted to free the trapped workers. But that night, as the rescue efforts continued, a fire broke out in the ruined plant. Many trapped workers were burned alive. Helplessly, the rescuers could only look on with horror. The exact number of dead is unknown, but estimates range between 88 and 145 workers killed that day, with another 150 suffering serious injuries. The large building was only 7 years old when it collapsed. Poor construction was determined to be the cause of the disaster. In an effort to maximize profits, the mill had more heavy equipment inside than the building could support. The New York Times reported the building was never considered to be as staunch as it ought to have been. It was built about 7 years since and was then thought a sham. Indeed, before the machinery was put in, the walls spread to such a degree that some 22 tons of iron plates were put in to save it from falling by its own weight. After the disaster, the mill was rebuilt. Workers at the new mill claimed to see the ghosts of those who had died in the tragedy. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
Officials from the United States, Canada, and the UK all said Thursday that intelligence indicated that the Ukrainian jetliner that crashed shortly after taking off from Tehran was mistakenly shot down by an Iranian anti-aircraft missile. The Boeing 737-800 crashed early Wednesday, killing all 176 people on board. The jet, which was leaving for Kyiv, reportedly was in flames and tried to turn around before crashing. Iran said the cause appeared to be mechanical failure. A spokesman for the Iranian government called the reports a big lie and said the plane's black box will reveal the true cause of the crash. Initially, Iran's civil aviation organization said it wouldn't share the black box data recovered from the crash with the U.S. or Boeing, the plane's manufacturer. But now Ukraine and Boeing are invited to take place in the investigation. The House voted 224 to 194 Thursday to approve the War Powers Resolution, which would force the president to seek approval from Congress for armed conflict with Iran. 8 Democrats voted no. Representatives Joe Cunningham from South Carolina, Anthony Brindisi of New York, Max Rose of New York, Josh Gottheimer from New Jersey, Kendra Horn of Oklahoma, Elaine Luria of Virginia, Ben McAdams of Utah, and Stephanie Murphy of Florida. And then there were 3 Republicans who voted yes. Thomas Massie of Kentucky, Francis Rooney of Florida, and surprisingly, one of Trump's biggest defenders, Matt Gaetz, also of Florida, who went on the floor to explain his reasoning.
I represent more troops than any other member of this body. I buried one of them earlier today at Arlington. If the members of our armed services have the courage to go and fight and die in these wars, as Congress, we ought to have the courage to vote for them or against them. I support the president. Killing Soleimani was the right decision, but engaging in another forever war in the Middle East would be the wrong decision, and that's why I'm voting for this resolution.
Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia sponsored a similar proposal, but it faces a tougher road in the Senate. Democrats say that under the 1973 War Powers Act, the resolution would be binding on Trump without his signature if it's passed by both chambers. Many Republicans said it still wouldn't be binding, and the courts have not ruled definitively. Nancy Pelosi said the House might also consider legislation to repeal the 2002 AUMF, Authorization for Use of Military Force in Iraq, and a bill to bar funding for military action against Iran not explicitly approved by Congress. All right, what are you waiting for? At her weekly press conference on Thursday, Pelosi was again asked when she might send the articles of impeachment over to the Senate.
Now, in terms of impeachment, you will keep asking me the same question. I keep giving you the same answer. As I said right from the start, we need to see the arena in which we are sending our managers. Is that too much to ask? They don't want documents, the documentation. They don't want witnesses. They may want a dismissal, which is proof that they cannot cannot clear the president of the wrongdoing that he has put forth.
So are you going to hold on to the articles indefinitely?
No, I'm not holding him indefinitely. I'll send them over when I'm ready. And that will probably be soon. I just, he said, if you don't send them over, I'm going to pass the Mexico-U.S.-Canada trade agreement. Okay. No, we want to see what they're willing to do and the manner in which they will do it.
A Justice Department inquiry into Hillary Clinton that began after Republicans demanded more investigations into the former Democratic presidential nominee is reportedly ending after finding nothing. In November of 2017, then Attorney General Jeff Sessions assigned John Huber, the U.S. Attorney in Utah, the task of examining concerns expressed by Trump and his congressional allies that alleged that the FBI had failed to adequately investigate possible corruption during Clinton's tenure as Secretary of State and at the Clinton Foundation. The current and former officials said that Huber had nearly finished his work without finding anything significant. So that happened. Donald Trump on Thursday also proposed rewriting parts of the National Environmental Policy Act aimed at easing regulations to speed up approvals of new mines, pipelines, and other projects, some of which could hurt the environment or contribute to climate change. The proposed rules would give local communities little influence over projects in their area. The industry has complained that the current process results in burdensome delays. Trump said the changes would let builders complete new highways, quote, in a fraction of the time. We will not stop until our nation's gleaming new infrastructure has made America the envy of the world again. Ugh. The New York Times is reporting on disparaging remarks made by Boeing employees about federal rules, flight simulators used to train pilots, and colleagues involved in developing the 737 MAX jet, this according to internal messages delivered to congressional investigators on Thursday. Quote, would you put your family on a MAX simulator-trained aircraft? I wouldn't, one employee said to another in 2018, before the first of two crashes that killed 346 people and led to the plane's global grounding. Another employee suggested Boeing workers hadn't been forthcoming with the FAA, saying in 2018, quote, I still haven't been forgiven by God for the covering up I did last year. Yeeks. Another employee said in 2017 that the 737 MAX was, quote, designed by clowns who are in turn supervised by monkeys, end quote. The International Olympic Committee is letting athletes know ahead of the 2020 Tokyo Games that political protests will not be allowed. The IOC released its guidelines on Thursday, which prohibit athletes from taking a knee, making hand gestures with a political meaning, or wearing armbands. Olympians will be allowed to share their political opinions on their own social media accounts or during interviews with the press. Athletes who break the rules will receive disciplinary action from the IOC. Alrighty then. And finally, Brexit is on. The House of Commons voted overwhelmingly in favor of Prime Minister Boris Johnson's Brexit deal, which means the path is clear for the country to leave the European Union at the end of this month. Johnson's deal isn't very different from the one former UK Prime Minister Theresa May struggled to pass. The difference was in the execution. Johnson forced a snap election last month in which his Conservative Party won a commanding 365 of the House's 650 seats, making clearance of his Brexit plan all but inevitable. The UK will now split from the European Union on January 31st, at which time Brexit will then enter its second phase, which involves forming a trade deal with the EU by the end of the year. And Donald Trump must be sick of all the winning. A New York State judge on Thursday denied Trump's efforts to dismiss a defamation lawsuit against him by arguing his residency in Washington should preclude him from being sued in New York. The judge's ruling will allow the lawsuit by longtime magazine columnist E. Jean Carroll to move forward. You might remember in November, Carroll sued Trump for defamation over what she has said were his lies denying her public accusation months earlier that he sexually assaulted her in a dressing room at Bergdorf Goodman in Manhattan in the late 1990s. After Carroll went public with her story, Trump denied the incident had occurred, calling it totally false, and said of Carroll that he, quote, never met this person. Those claims, the lawsuit said, were false and defamatory. And on Thursday, New York State Supreme Court Justice Doris Lynn Cohen not only denied Trump's motion to dismiss the case, but faulted him for failing to include a written statement to support his effort. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more and check out the site at NicoleSandler.com, and please click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 36 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high, maybe of about 47, 48, somewhat similar as what we had yesterday, though the overnight low is expected to be in the mid to upper 30s. We are currently, winds are light and variable out of the northeast, and will be they will be shifting out of the south in a couple of hours and increasing in velocity to 5 to 10 miles per hour, bringing with it just about 1/10 of an inch of rain for the day, with occasional showers, and then tonight, occasional light rain, and we are expecting 1/4 of an inch of that light rain overnight. The winds will be out of the southwest and increasing in velocity even more at 10 to 20 miles per hour. And then tomorrow, light rain early, remaining cloudy with showers in the afternoon. Winds will be out of the west at 5 to 10 miles per hour, expecting another 1/4 inch of rain for the day and night. And then overnight, we are expecting snow, and about 1.5 inches of snow on Sunday. And then Monday and Tuesday, they're looking to have multiple inches, 3 to 5 inches. And we'll see how that works out, because everything is subject to change, of course. Pollen is rated at none. Air quality index is good at 23 parts per million. The daytime UV index is low at 1. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.27 inches. Visibility is down to 6 miles. And relative humidity is at 94%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. There. London is 46 and partly cloudy, with pretty much of a part-time royal family with Meghan and Harry. Good luck to you, kids. Paris is 47 and cloudy. Rome is 57 and sunny. Kyiv is 35 and cloudy. Kabul is 20 degrees and fair. Hong Kong is 63 and fair. Tokyo is 44 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 74 and mostly cloudy with wind, which has kicked up the fires tremendously. Then that's bad. San Francisco, California is 44 degrees and fair. And New York is 43 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world.
anonymous worker bees at Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. A radio station host and manager in the Mexican state of Michoacan, who went missing in late November, has been found dead, officials said yesterday, Thursday, adding to the growing murder toll of journalists as violence escalates across the country. Local media said he had been shot to death. Mexico registered 10 killings of journalists in 2019, the same number as the year before, and in line with Syria, making Mexico one of the world's most dangerous places for media workers. The body of Fidel Avila of the Que Buena station in the western state of Michoacan's Huetamo municipality was found on a highway earlier this week, 40 days after he was last seen at a cultural event in neighboring Guerrero State, Mexico's National Commission of Human Rights said. Michoacan and Guerrero are two of Mexico's most violent and lawless states, where rival drug gangs have battled to control smuggling routes.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Ricardo Ortiz of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Puerto Rico Governor Wanda Vázquez said power should be fully restored across the island by Monday after the worst earthquake in over a century knocked out the U.S. territory's biggest generating plant and left nearly all of its 3 million residents without electricity. 2 days after the earthquake, only half of the Caribbean island had power. The Caribbean island's largest power plant, Costa Sur, could remain offline for a year or more due to earthquake damage, Ortiz told a news conference, evoking memories of lengthy power outages following back-to-back hurricanes that devastated Puerto Rico in 2017, in which Trump, in his infinite wisdom, because he has the big brain, decided you don't need any money. Here, have some paper towels. Power should be completely restored by Monday as other generating plants come back online, Ortiz, executive director of public power utility PREPA, and Vázquez said at a news conference. Our projection, as you have heard, is that during the weekend or Monday, we will have 100% of customers with energy services, said Vázquez, who took office in August. Tuesday's 6.4 magnitude earthquake and 5.6 aftershock killed at least one person and destroyed or damaged about 300 homes in the south of the island. The earthquake added to Puerto Rico's woes as it continues to recover from Hurricanes Maria and Irma, which killed nearly 3,000 people in 2017, and go through a bankruptcy in the process. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, but you do know that we're going to meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. You also know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on, so do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all through the weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, l'âge tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.